All right, so I guess just wanted to talk a little bit about the process of compute and what direction to go in. So I guess what really prompted all this is, getting into the TrueNest server and doing all of this. It makes it very apparent that specialized compute units may be better than trying to make a catch-all super powerful system. So the thought process here is that, I built the TRX 40 system a number of years ago now, and AMD has not released a successor to it. Now, it's possible that they'll release a successor this year, but the query is whether or not I really need it. So I'm looking at this and seeing that, with the TrueNAS system, we built a 192 thread system off of, e-waste parts. And the Threadripper system has never been the perfect solution. It is straddling the line in between consumer and professional. And generally, I find myself in the professional camp, but I really should either lean all the way into that, in which case you lose a lot of usability functions, or I create a specialized platform and put the workstation loads on a workstation. So I'm thinking about it and going through it, and just as a thought process of, we could do a 13th gen i9, plenty of RAM, and I would lose half my threads, but I would gain a ton in single-threaded performance. And the reality is, for most of what I do on this computer, that would make the most sense. And then I could set up a secondary system in the server cabinet here and have that be the video editing and rendering farm and all of that, to where I could specialize these components. I could put half a terabyte of memory in there for, it's, I was just talking on the Discord earlier, it is staggering the difference in between the desktop stuff and the e-waste server stuff. So when I built this desktop many years ago, I went all out and got 128 gigs of RAM. Well, 128 gigs of desktop memory at the time was over $1,000 worth of memory. 128 gigs of RAM in this system is less than $100. They're both DDR4. One is ECC, so technically, better in that regard. The clock speed is not quite as high, but realistically, the difference in between 2066 and 3200 is not that much. So I don't know. It brings up a lot of questions as to what really suits what I'm doing and what the best path forward is, because the The consumer platform updates on a much more frequent cadence and has a lot of, quality of life features that are difficult to find in the desktop variant. For instance, Thunderbolt 4. I struggled and struggled and struggled and failed, eventually failed on trying to get Thunderbolt 4 into this system. It has a Thunderbolt header on it, but the BIOS options just aren't there. So I could technically get it to plug in and see things, but I could never get the BIOS to properly support it. So, those things are on the consumer platform, readily available. The downside is that you don't get the PCI Express lanes. And so you really only get one 16x slot, and that's the end of it. Now, these days, you get plenty of M.2 storage slots. Back in the day, that wasn't the case, but nowadays, M.2 storage is everywhere. So that's not that big of a deal. The other one is, the capture card that I'm using right now. If I was to plug it into a consumer grade board, would immediately drop the primary slot down to a X8 slot, which is just frustrating. So, and it's a give and take. And there's a lot of different options and things that I could do, but I'm just putting it out there as a thought process. Do I really need a Threadripper system this fall, or could I just build, say, the 14th gen stuff comes out? I could just build a simple 14th gen system, save a ton of money, because I could build the whole system on a consumer grade platform with the absolute best components for probably less than I would spend on just the CPU alone on the Threadripper platform. And then, build a e-waste server that has everything that I could ever want on it. And so, yeah, it's just, I don't know. I find it very, very interesting and not a thought I would have even considered 6 months ago, because, I needed the render power, but now it's become very apparent that the used server market has render power for days, and I can just set another system up over there. I mean, yeah, it's the only thing that's really the sticking point is finding a system that has enough VRAM to support the 8K footage. So the 8K footage, even on my system, on the Threadripper system that I've got now, is bound by the GPU. And so the GPU has 24 gigs of VRAM, and with certain effects applied to the 8K footage is not enough. Because the 8K footage just is an absolute hog when it comes to VRAM. So it's possible that I may need to look at other options that, may not be, the 4090 is the top tier card right now, but getting the Quattro version pushes the price up even further than the desktop version already is. And that just doesn't make sense. So more than likely, it would be something like an older generation card that has more VRAM but is an older generation. And then because DaVinci Resolve supports multi GPU, I could add more than one. So, it just thoughts. And, overall, I think I'm leaning towards this consumer grade desktop and then set up everything else just as a true workstation. So